The Heroine and the Ancient Tree. The journey itself is my home, Matsuo Bashō. January 2019. I picked Emilie up at the station and gave her a quick hug, and she climbed into the car. "I'm happy to see you," I said, starting the engine. She turned to me, raising an eyebrow, and with a hint of skepticism in her voice said, "Are you really? That's not what you said on the phone." "You're so accident-prone, Emilie. I'm sorry I said that. Please don't be mad." I smiled and shrugged slightly. I was pretty content at Gentle Annie's campground, but I'm happy that we're going to go explore the South Island together while you heal. She gave me a dubious look, and I could tell my words hadn't reassured her. "Did you bring enough snacks?" she teased, referring to my penchant for always being well stocked. I laughed and pointed to the bag brimming with dried fruits, nuts, and nachos. "I've got everything we need," I replied, and we both chuckled, knowing that we would probably have to make a stop to get more. "Now, how do I get out of here?" I looked around for the exit. "It's over there, Mama," she pointed. "I see you still get lost in a parking lot," she continued, never missing an opportunity to poke fun at my terrible sense of direction. I found the exit, and we began to follow the winding road that hugged the coastal shores on one side and the Southern Alps on the other side, forming a majestic backdrop to this rugged region. Before global warming, the glaciers descended to near sea level, flowing through temperate forests before running out to sea. "Have you heard from Olivier?" Emilie asked as we curved along the coastal road. "Well, last you knew, he went to stay with Melanie in BC, right?" I glanced over. She nodded. "Yeah, but then what?" "He got restless," I said. "Well, no surprise there," she scoffed. "Olivier can't sit still." "Yeah, so he went cherry picking for a few weeks to save money and then flew to Iceland," I told her. "To Iceland?" she asked. "Yeah, he thought he'd walk around the island, something that Papa would do, only he wasn't prepared and ended up having a panic attack." Emilie rolled her eyes. "That is so typical of him." "It is," I agreed. "His bag was too heavy, and he said the campground was too expensive, so he spent the night in a cafe. Apparently, all-night cafes are a thing in Iceland during the summer. A friend eventually bought him a ticket to London." "To London?" She raised an eyebrow. "What is he going to do there?" "Well, he moved into a hostel and found work in a bar for a while, but he barely made any money. He was freaking out about how much everyone was doing heavy drugs and said he was scared he'd try something once and never stop," I told her. "So your grandmother bought him a ticket and flew him back to Montreal, and he's staying with her now." "Is he okay?" she asked. "She's helping him get tested for ADHD and anxiety. They're looking to find a film program that's a good fit for him, so he can go back to school. For now, he seems okay, but you know how that is always changing." As we drove, the conversation faded into the background and our attention shifted to the scenery around us. We turned inland at Hast, and the rugged peaks of the Southern Alps drew closer. This was a sign that we were nearing Queenstown, a well-known ski resort. I had the GPS set to the closest Freedom campground to the town. We settled in by a campsite next to a pristine lake where the clear waters reflected the surrounding mountains. After setting up camp, I practiced Tai Chi at the lake's edge, while gentle ripples of water moved across the surface of the lake. The air was cool and fresh. Emilie joined me with her camera to capture the changing light as the sun sets. We stood there in silence, taking in the view. "It's incredible, isn't it?" I said. Emilie nodded. "It's beautiful like this everywhere on the South Island," I told her. Once it was dark, we set up the camp stove and I cooked quinoa with broccoli and stewed meat in one pot. "This is good," Emilie approved. "Yep, I'm a one-pot wonder," I said. I was proud that I could prepare food that was both healthy for us and tasty, even while living out of my car, Rupert. "You certainly are," Emilie agreed, laughing at the affectionate name I called myself. "Tomorrow, let's head to Arrowtown and see what this place is all about," I said. "I also need to find a library where I can teach my Wednesday class." She nodded in agreement, looking out toward the mountains as the sky darkened. I thought about how rare it was to have this much freedom, with my only fixed commitment being the weekly class. My online class was growing, with people joining each week, but teaching on the road meant constantly adapting. I had taught from a children's corner, in a library, cramped cubbies, to campgrounds, and even empty community halls, depending on what space I could find. When we arrived in Arrowtown, I found it was no different. The library was tiny, and the only option was to teach from the backyard. Luckily, it wasn't raining. The librarian was helpful, running a long cable for power and opening the back doors so I could set up outside. The weather was warm and sunny, and I was able to connect to their internet without any problems. We stayed there for a few days before continuing to the southern tip of the island. We had heard this was a place where you could swim with Hector's dolphins, one of the smallest and rarest dolphin species found only in New Zealand. The water was cold, but the dolphins were curious and swam close enough for us to see their unique markings and playful behavior. They moved effortlessly through the water, sometimes flipping in the air or gliding alongside each other. A sea lion appeared as well, riding the waves with the dolphins before resting on the beach. Being in the water with these animals was unforgettable and gave me a deeper respect for New Zealand's wildlife. 2 weeks with Emilie flew by in a whirlwind of activity, and we were soon on our way to Dunedin Airport for her flight back to Wellington. I dropped her off and started to drive back to the campground when Rupert had his moment to prove just how reliable he was. A police car sped past me and skidded to a stop on the shoulder of the road. Oh no, what did I do wrong? I always had a feeling I did something wrong whenever I saw a policeman. Distracted by the flashing lights, I'd failed to notice the reason the police had pulled over. A large rock was sitting in the middle of the highway. Oh my God, there's a rock, I shrieked and swerved at the last second to avoid it, but it was too late and a heavy thud reverberated through the car. Oh no, I hit the rock. I yelled but kept driving. I was too afraid to stop, and I just kept praying everything would be fine until I reached the campsite. Once there, I hurried to get help from a fellow camper to check for any damage to the car. We performed a soap and water test on the tires and discovered a puncture. I wasted no time getting Rupert to the garage, where they quickly fixed the tire, and then I was back on the road. I sighed with relief. That was a close call. Good job, Rupert. After a quick stop in the city of Christchurch to see a mechanic who fixed a few of the dents in my car, the next stop was an empty expanse of beach north of the city. The beach stretched endlessly with kilometers of pristine sand and not a person in sight. The beauty was awe-inspiring, but I also felt uneasy, knowing this area was prone to earthquakes. The isolation made me hyper-aware of every sound and movement. I gathered my courage and stepped out onto the deserted beach. Everywhere I looked seemed eerily similar. I knew I had to be mindful and take note of the specific formations of trees and scattered debris that marked the place where I needed to turn back through the dunes to the campgrounds. I walked barefoot, letting the cold water wash over my feet. The waves rolled in with a steady rhythm, grounding me in the present. The emptiness around me reminded me how small and exposed I was, with nothing but ocean on one side and untamed dunes on the other. There was not a soul in sight, not even a fisherman. After an hour, I came across a massive tree trunk, sun-bleached and weathered, as big as a small house. It stood out in the endless stretch of sand, and I decided this would be my landmark and the spot to film my next video. The next morning, I returned with my camera. Standing in front of the trunk, I felt its size behind me like a quiet force. As I filmed my movements, every breath and gesture connected me to the raw power of the place. Standing in front of the giant tree, I felt a clear sense of who I was becoming. The seeds I had planted during my time in New Zealand were starting to take root. For years, I'd been moving from place to place, unsure of where I belonged or how to create a life on my own terms. Here with my camera set up on a deserted beach, teaching Tai Chi online to students all over the world, I realized I was building something real. It felt like yesterday when I was standing at the airport and saying goodbye to my parents, not knowing that this journey I was embarking on would last a whole lifetime. Arriving in Israel, where everything was so different from where I came from, it all felt so overwhelming. Joining the army, going to university, and going through the emotional breakdowns I had while living with Eric. On the one hand, it seemed so long ago, but on the other hand, it felt like it happened just yesterday. The years I taught scuba diving in Southeast Asia were like training for me to learn to work while I enjoyed traveling. Those years were tinged with sadness because of the difficult relationship I was in with Mark, yet still filled with beauty from the new places I had experienced. Then I arrived in Honduras and I met Pierre. So many things changed. I ran a boutique hotel, I became a mother, I acquired so many skills, managing a business, working with people, but I was still in another difficult relationship. It's like I've always led parallel lives, one filled with the miracles of my experiences and the other marked by my failed relationships. In China, I was so broken and battered that I prayed daily to the goddess of compassion to teach me how to love. In the end, while standing and performing in front of that ancient tree, I realized it all came back to the most important relationship, the one with myself. In the beauty of that land, on the beaches and in front of the wide vistas, performing Tai Chi for the students who came to learn with me, I finally repaired the relationship within myself. I learned to be my own friend, to trust my intuition, to applaud my achievements, and to believe that I could learn from my mistakes. In New Zealand, I stopped beating myself up. I didn't have any breakdowns, even with the tumultuous relationship I had with Olivier. Those days were finally behind me. What I had in front of me was the life I created, connecting with people from all over the world, sharing my art, my skills, and the knowledge I gained from a lifetime of travel. I never had a map, never really knew where I was going, but somehow I was always leading myself home. In front of that ancient tree trunk, I finally found that home inside myself.